The conference room smelled like coffee and cold ambition, and I was standing in the middle of it wearing a suit Vivian picked out for me 3 years ago. "Everyone, this won't take long," Vivian said, not even looking at me. She said it the way she opened board meetings. Like I was an agenda item. 12 executives sat around that glass table. I recognized most of them. None of them looked at me like a person. They looked at me like furniture that had wandered in by mistake. "Vivian, can we do this somewhere else?" I asked. "There is no somewhere else, Ethan. This is my life. You've been part of it for 3 years, and it's time we're honest about what that meant." Marcus Reed leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, a small smile tugging at his mouth. I'd never liked the way he looked at her. I'd never liked the way he looked at me either. Like I was a problem he was patiently waiting to solve. "Honest," I repeated. "Okay, let's be honest." Vivian slid a folder across the table. It stopped an inch from my hand, like she'd practiced the distance. "Divorce papers," she said. "Already reviewed by legal. Clean split. You keep the apartment in Queens. I keep everything else." Everything else being the marriage. Being the company, she snapped. Being my name. Being the last 3 years of my life that I spent explaining to investors why my husband doesn't work. I felt my jaw tighten, but I kept my voice level. "I do work, Vivian." "On what? Your little projects? Your consulting that never turns into contracts." She said it loud enough for the room, loud enough for Marcus, loud enough for Howard Vance, who sat at the head of the table pretending to read his phone. "I built Heart Innovations from nothing. I don't have room in my life for dead weight." Dead weight. 3 years of making her coffee before board calls. 3 years of listening to her rehearse pitches at 2 a.m. 3 years of staying quiet in rooms exactly like this one, because she once told me, in the dark, in a version of her voice nobody in that room had ever heard, that she didn't want a partner who competed with her. She wanted a partner who believed in her. I believed in her. That was the joke. I believed in her so much I disappeared for her. I remembered the night she said it. We were in bed, lights off, and she'd had a bad call with an investor who'd talked over her for 20 minutes straight. "Promise me something," she'd whispered. "Promise you'll never be one of those men who needs to win every room. I need one place where I don't have to compete." "I promise," I'd said, and I meant it. I just never told her what I was giving up to keep that promise. "Say something," she said now, when I didn't move. "God, Ethan, even now you've got nothing." Marcus shifted in his seat. "Vivian, maybe we should." "No," she said. "He should hear it. Everyone should hear it. I married a man with potential and I got a man with excuses." I looked down at the folder. My hand didn't shake. That surprised me more than anything she'd said. I thought about my grandfather, sitting in his study 3 states away, the only person alive who knew what I actually built before I met her. I thought about the company I sold at 24 for more money than this entire room would make in a decade combined. I thought about the night I met Vivian, at a fundraiser I almost skipped, and how she'd looked at me like I was a project instead of a person. Ambitious, she called me then, but unlucky. I never corrected her. Correcting her would have meant explaining the rest, and the rest would have meant she wasn't the only successful one in the room. I thought about choosing, deliberately, to let all of that stay buried, because she'd asked me once, quietly, not to make her feel small. I never made her feel small. She was doing a fine job of that to me, all on her own. "You're really doing this here," I said. "Not a question. I'm doing this everywhere it matters," she said. "This is my company. These are my people. I don't owe you a private conversation." Howard Vance finally looked up from his phone. "Vivian, this is highly unprofessional." "So is being married to a man who hasn't had a job in 3 years, Howard. I'm done pretending otherwise." I opened the folder. I read exactly one line, enough to confirm it said what she'd promised it said, and I picked up the pen sitting beside it. "Ethan," Marcus said, almost gentle, like he was doing me a favor. "You don't have to sign this today." "Yes," I said. "I do." I signed it. The room went quiet in a way it hadn't been quiet the entire meeting. 12 executives who had spent 10 minutes watching me get dismantled suddenly didn't know where to look. Vivian took the folder back like she was closing a deal. Maybe she was. "That's it?" she asked. and for half a second, something flickered across her face that wasn't triumph. I almost believed it was doubt. "That's it," I said. I stood up. I buttoned my jacket, the one she'd picked out, and I walked toward the door like a man leaving a meeting that had run long, not a man leaving his marriage. "You'll regret not fighting for this," she called after me. "You always do this, Ethan. You just fold." I stopped at the door. I didn't turn around, because I didn't want her to see whatever was on my face. "Take care of yourself, Vivian." I walked out. The elevator doors closed slower than I wanted them to. I stood there alone, staring at my reflection in the brushed steel, and I let myself feel it, just for the 7 floors down. The humiliation, the grief, the strange, cold relief underneath both of them. She thought she'd just erased 3 years of dead weight from her life. She thought signing a folder made her the one in control, the one who got to walk away clean while I disappeared quietly. The apartment in Queens still had boxes I hadn't unpacked from the honeymoon phase, back when I told myself I'd only need this place as a backup. 3 years later, it was the only place I had. Sophie let herself in without knocking. She'd always had a key, even after I stopped needing her to use it. "I brought food," she said, holding up a bag. "And also I'm furious, so brace yourself." "Hi to you too." "Don't hi me." Marcus Reed texted me a link to a company memo about the divorce like I'd want to celebrate with him. "Celebrate, Ethan. Like you're a merger that fell through." I sat down on a box marked kitchen, CH3 in Vivian's handwriting from 3 moves ago. It kind of was one. "Don't do that." Sophie dropped the bag on the counter and turned to face me. "Don't make jokes so I can't be angry on your behalf. I've been angry on your behalf for 2 years. I just never said it because you looked happy." "I was happy." "You were quiet. Those aren't the same thing." She crossed her arms. "You know what she called you at Christmas? To Aunt Rita? Ethan's figuring things out." "Figuring things out. Like you were 19 and dropped out of college. Not a man who—" She stopped herself. "Not a man who what?" "Nothing." "Sophie. I always thought she was ashamed of you." "There. I said it. I watched her introduce you to people for 3 years like you were something she had to explain, and I never understood why you let her." I didn't answer right away. I was thinking about a dinner party 8 months into the marriage, at Howard Vance's house, chandeliers and men in expensive watches talking about acquisitions. Vivian had put her hand on my back and said, "This is Ethan, my husband. He's between projects right now." Marcus had smirked into his wine glass. Nobody at that table asked me a single question for the rest of the night. "I let her because I asked her to," I said finally. Sophie blinked. "What?" "I told her not to introduce me as anything more than that. I didn't want people asking questions I didn't want to answer at her events." "Why not? You could have told the truth. You could have said, 'Actually, I built and sold a logistics platform for 9 figures before I met you.' That would have shut the whole table up." "That wasn't the point, Soph. She said she wanted a partner, not competition. I believed that meant staying small." "That's not staying small, Ethan. That's disappearing." Her voice cracked a little. "And I watched you do it for 3 years, and I hated it, and I never said anything because it wasn't my marriage to fix." "You could have said something. Would you have listened?" She sat down across from me, some of the fight leaving her shoulders. "You loved her. People don't listen to reason when they love someone. I know that better than anyone. Remember Jake?" "Don't remind me about Jake." "My point exactly." She almost smiled, then it faded. "I just don't understand how you let her make you feel small for 3 years and never once told her she was wrong. Because if I told her, and she still didn't care who I really was, then I'd have to admit the whole marriage was built on a lie I told myself. It was easier to stay quiet." Sophie reached over and squeezed my hand. "It's not easier now, though. Is it?" "No," I admitted. "Now it just hurts different." I looked at the boxes around me. 3 years, and it all fit in a moving truck. "I have to go see Grandpa," I said. Arthur Cole's study smelled like cedar and old paper, same as it had my whole life. He was sitting by the window when I walked in, a glass of scotch in his hand he hadn't touched yet. "Sophie called me," he said, before I'd even sat down. "Told me everything. The meeting, the room full of suits, all of it." I signed the papers, Grandpa. I know. I didn't fight. I know that too. He finally took a sip. You want to tell me why? Because fighting would have meant explaining who I am. And I promised her I wouldn't do that. Arthur set the glass down harder than he needed to. Ethan, listen to me. You built an empire before you were 25. You own pieces of companies that woman's board would kill to have relationships with. And you let her stand in front of her entire company and call you dead weight. She didn't know. She didn't ask. His voice sharpened. That's the part you keep skipping over. 3 years married to you, and she never once asked who you really were underneath the man she decided you'd be. That's not love, Ethan. That's cowardice wearing a wedding ring, hers for never asking, and yours for never telling her. I sat with that. It landed harder than anything Vivian had said in that conference room. I did it to protect the marriage, I said quietly. You did it to protect yourself from finding out she might not have loved the real you. He leaned forward. And now you don't have to wonder anymore, do you? She already answered the question. She just doesn't know what she answered. What am I supposed to do with that, Grandpa? Show up at her office with a bank statement? No, you're smarter than that, and you know it. He set his glass down and looked at me the way he used to when I was a kid, showing him a broken engine, deciding whether I could fix it myself or needed help. You're going to stop hiding, quietly and completely. Let the truth walk in on its own. You don't need to throw it at her. You just need to stop covering it up. And if it destroys her company in the process, then maybe her company deserved to be tested by the truth. That's not your problem to solve for her anymore. I thought about the memo Sophie mentioned, about Marcus's smirk at that dinner table, about every room I'd walked into smaller than I actually was. I'm done being quiet, I said. Arthur almost smiled. Good. Because I've been waiting 3 years to watch you stop apologizing for who you are. I stood up, and for the first time since that conference room, something in my chest wasn't grief anymore. It was decision. Daniel Pierce answered his phone on the second ring, the same way he had since college. Sterling, or should I say Cole? I never know which one I'm getting. Cole today, I said. Can you meet? For you. I'll cancel a client call. That's how I know something's actually happening. We met at the same diner we'd gone to since business school, a place with cracked booths and coffee that tasted like it had been reheated since the Clinton administration. Daniel slid in across from me, still in his suit, tie loosened, looking like a man who managed other people's money for a living and never quite trusted his own. So, he said, you look like a man who finally remembered who he is. Vivian and I signed the divorce papers. I know. It's already in 3 group chats I'm in. People I've never met are calling you the sad husband. He winced. Sorry. That was supposed to be encouraging. It's fine. It's accurate. For now. For now, Daniel repeated. That sounds like a man with a plan. I pulled out my phone and slid it across the table, open to the holdings page under Sterling Capital. Daniel had helped me set up half of it years ago, back when I still believed staying anonymous was protecting something worth protecting. Walk me through it again, I said. Everything EC Sterling touches that connects to Heart Innovations. Daniel scrolled, and I watched his eyebrows climb the way they always did when he remembered the scale of what we'd built quietly. Sterling Capital owns 61% of Meridian Logistics, he said. Heart Innovations routes almost all of their West Coast distribution through Meridian. You also hold a controlling stake in Larkspur Freight Systems, which handles half their international shipping contracts. And the third one. He looked up at me. Vantage Dynamics, the AI supply chain platform Vivian's been pitching to her board as the future of the company. The one she's betting next fiscal year on. I own 74% of Vantage. Daniel set the phone down slowly. So let me get this straight. The woman who called you dead weight in front of her entire leadership team is about to bet her company's future on a platform you personally control. That's the situation. Ethan. He leaned forward, voice dropping even though the diner was empty except for us and a waitress refilling ketchup bottles. You understand what this means. You could ruin her with one phone call. One instruction to your board representatives. One quiet withdrawal of support from Vantage, and Heart Innovations loses its entire fiscal year strategy overnight. Are you going to? I didn't answer right away. I thought about the conference room, the folder, dead weight, said loud enough for 12 people to hear. I'm not calling anyone to hurt her, I said finally. Then what are you calling them for? To stop hiding. That's different. Daniel studied me for a second. Those two things might end up looking exactly the same from where she's standing. Maybe. But the intention matters to me, even if it doesn't matter to her. Okay. Daniel pulled out his own phone. So what do you want to do first? Reinstate my name on the Sterling filings. Publicly. No more nominee directors standing in for me at the board level. That's going to get noticed within a week. Maybe days. I know. You're really done being invisible. I've been invisible for 3 years, Daniel. I'm tired of watching people underestimate me in rooms I could buy the building out from under them in. He smiled for the first time since we'd sat down. Now that's the guy I went to business school with. There's something else, I said. There's always something else with you. When Vantage was still a startup, before I bought controlling interest, Vivian pitched me on it. Not knowing it was me, obviously, she pitched Sterling Capital through a proxy meeting, thinking she was talking to some faceless fund. I remember reading the deck at 2 in the morning while she slept in the next room, not knowing her name was on the cover page. Daniel's eyebrows went up again. You're kidding. I approved the investment the next day. Best decision Sterling made that quarter. I never told her. Why not? Because if I told her, I'd have to explain how I knew her handwriting on the margin notes. And that would have meant telling her everything. So instead you funded your wife's biggest career win anonymously and let her think she did it entirely on her own. She did do it on her own. I just made sure the door was open when she knocked. Daniel shook his head slowly. That's either the most romantic thing I've ever heard or the saddest. I genuinely can't tell. Neither can I admitted. Not anymore. I got the call from Lena 2 days later. Vivian's assistant, the one who always slipped me an extra coffee at company events, back when I still went to company events. I probably shouldn't be telling you this, she said, voice low like she was in a stairwell. Then maybe don't. No, I want to. Marcus pushed for an emergency shareholder vote this morning. He wants operational control folded into the COO position before the Vantage rollout. Vivian shut it down in the meeting, but Ethan, he didn't back off quietly. He told her, in front of Howard Vance, that she was too emotional right now to lead the transition alone. I felt something tighten in my chest that wasn't quite satisfaction and wasn't quite pity. Somewhere in between. What did she say? Nothing, for a second. Then she said the vote wasn't happening and walked out. Marcus looked like he'd been planning that for months. He probably has. You don't sound surprised. I'm not. Guys like Marcus don't wait for weakness. They manufacture it, then point at it. Is that what you think he's doing? Manufacturing it? I know exactly what he's doing. He's been circling that COO title for a year, waiting for a crack in the marriage or the company, whichever came first. The marriage went first. Now he's using it. That's cold. It's accurate. Doesn't mean I have to like watching it happen to her. Lena was quiet for a moment. Why are you telling me all this like you already know how it ends? Because I might. Ethan, whatever you're... She didn't respond to that right away, and I didn't need her to. I hung up, set the phone down on Daniel's list of Sterling filings, and looked at my own name printed next to numbers large enough to change everything. For 3 years, I'd made myself smaller so a room could feel bigger without me in it. I told myself Rachel Kim was rearranging whiteboard diagrams when I walked into the Meridian offices for the first time in almost a year, and she didn't stop what she was doing to greet me like I mattered. She just kept working, marker in hand. You're late, she said. The routing algorithm you flagged in March finally broke in production. I fixed it myself, but I wanted you to see how, since you're the one who caught the flaw nobody else noticed. You didn't have to wait for me. I know. I wanted to. She capped the marker and turned around. Most investors skim a report and ask about margins. You actually read the technical appendix. Do you know how rare that is? I used to build things like this. Reading the appendix isn't generous, it's just interesting to me. Well, it's rare, she said again. And it's the reason I took this job over 2 other offers. I wanted to work somewhere the person signing the checks actually understood what I was building. I stood there for a second longer than the conversation required. 3 years of being introduced as between projects, and here was a 26-year-old engineer treating my attention like it meant something, simply because I'd bothered to pay it. "Thank you," I said, "for saying that." "Why are you thanking me for stating a fact?" I didn't have a good answer. I just knew that somewhere along the way, I'd started expecting to be dismissed, and it had become normal enough that respect felt foreign. "Can I ask you something?" Rachel said, leaning against the desk. "You clearly know this industry cold. Why do you let people think otherwise? Half the junior analysts here think you're just a quiet money guy who got lucky once. It's easier that way. Fewer expectations." That sounds exhausting, actually, being smart and pretending not to be. "You have no idea." She studied me for a second. "For what it's worth, the people who actually work with you know exactly who you are. Maybe it's time the people who don't find out too." I laughed, short and surprised. "Funny, that's basically what my grandfather told me last week." "Smart man. He'd like hearing you say that." My phone buzzed before I could figure out how to explain that. Daniel's name on the screen. "I have to take this," I said. "Go," Rachel said, already turning back to the whiteboard. "The appendix isn't going anywhere." "You need to hear this sitting down," Daniel said the second I picked up. "I'm standing in a hallway." "Talk." Vivian found out Marcus has been quietly accumulating Heart Innovations shares through a shell entity. Small amounts, spread across 6 months, but it adds up to just under 8% now. Where'd she find out? How Advance's compliance team flagged unusual trading patterns during a routine audit. She confronted Marcus in his office this morning. Lena heard the whole thing through the wall. And he didn't deny it. Told her he was protecting his position in case the Vantage rollout failed and she needed someone stable to steady the company. His words, not mine. Using information she gave him in confidence. That's the part that's really got her rattled. She trusted him with the fiscal projections before the board saw them. He used the timeline to buy in low before a deal that hadn't gone public yet. I leaned against the wall, letting that settle. Not satisfaction exactly. Something closer to watching a structure I already knew was unstable finally start to show its cracks from the outside. "There's more," Daniel said. The Larkspur freight deal Heart Innovations needed to lock in their European shipping contracts fell through this week. Larkspur's board went with a competitor. "Larkspur is mine." "I know. I told my analyst to let the decision play out on its own merits. No influence either way. It failed because Heart's proposal was weaker, not because of anything we did." So how Advance is furious. He built half his reputation on backing Vivian, and now he's watching her lose a contract to a company you happen to control, right after his own compliance team caught her COO buying up shares behind her back. He's starting to distance himself. Lena said he barely spoke to Vivian in the hallway yesterday. That's not a good sign for her. It's a terrible sign for her. Howard doesn't do quiet disapproval unless he's already decided something. He's a chairman, Ethan. He's protecting the board's confidence, not her feelings. I closed my eyes for a second. None of that was me, Daniel. I want that clear. I know it wasn't, but it's going to look like it was, eventually. Everything's converging faster than we planned for. What do you mean? I mean there's a journalist, Tom Griggs, financial desk, decent reputation. He's been digging into the Sterling Holdings filings for a piece on unusual timing in supply chain contract renewals. He called my office this morning asking questions about ownership structure. What kind of questions? The kind that mean he already suspects there's a name behind Sterling that isn't on the public filings. I felt something tighten low in my chest. Not fear exactly. More like watching a door I'd built swing open faster than I was ready for. Did you tell him anything? Of course not. But Ethan, guys like Griggs don't stop once they smell something real. He's not going to let this go. Tom Griggs called me directly 2 hours later. I almost didn't answer a number I didn't recognize, but something told me to pick up. "Mr. Cole," he said, and my whole body went still. "Financial journalist, Tom Griggs. I'm working on a story about Sterling Holdings, and I found something interesting in a contract amendment filed 18 months ago. Buried in the signature page. Your name, not a nominee's. Where did you get that document? Public record, if you know where to look." Most people don't. A pause. I think you know exactly what I found, Mr. Cole. I'd like the chance to talk to you before I publish anything. What exactly are you planning to publish? That the largest shareholder behind Meridian, Larkspur, and Vantage Dynamics is a man named Ethan Cole, who happens to have finalized a divorce from the CEO of the company those three firms all. And if I ask you not to run it, then I'd ask you why a man with nothing to hide would want silence instead of the truth. That's usually the more interesting question anyway. I stood in that hallway, phone pressed to my ear, 3 years of hiding suddenly reduced to a single overlooked signature page some reporter had stumbled onto by accident. Give me until tomorrow, I said. You've got until Friday. After that, I run the story with or without your comment. He hung up before I could answer. I stared at the phone in my hand, and for the first time since I'd walked out of that conference room, I realized the truth wasn't going to come out quietly the way I'd planned it. There was no version of this where I got to control the pace anymore. Daniel could delay filings. Arthur could offer advice. None of that mattered against a report. Tom Griggs called back Thursday afternoon, a day before his own deadline. I want to give you one more shot at this, he said. Confirm on the record, or I run it with decline to comment, and you know how that reads. Like I'm hiding something. Like you're hiding something, he agreed. So which is it, Mr. Cole? Why give me the choice at all? You already have the document. Because a confirmed story is a stronger story. And because, frankly, I want to know why a man who could have buried this under a dozen lawyers by now hasn't tried. Would it have worked if I had? Probably not forever, but you didn't even attempt it. That tells me something. I stood at the window of my apartment, looking down at a street full of people who had no idea what was about to change for me. I thought about Arthur's voice in that study. Loudly, this time. I thought about Rachel, unimpressed by money, impressed by work. I thought about Sophie asking why I let Vivian make me small for 3 years, and not having a real answer. Confirm it, I said. All of it. My name, the holdings, the timeline. Print it exactly how you found it. You understand what happens once this is public. I understand better than you do. All right then. A pause. For what it's worth, that's the answer I was hoping for. Most people in your position beg for silence. I'm done asking for silence. I've had 3 years of it. He thanked me and hung up. I stood there a long time after, waiting to feel something like fear. It didn't come. What came instead was quiet. Steady, like setting down something heavy I'd been carrying so long I forgot my arms could feel light. The article went live the next morning. The silent billionaire behind Heart Innovation's supply chain, an ex-husband of its CEO. Sophie sent it to me with 4 exclamation points and no other text. Daniel called within 10 minutes. It's everywhere, he said. Financial Twitter's on fire. 2 board members from your other portfolio companies already texted asking if it's true. Is it not true? It's completely true. That's why it's on fire. How bad is it going to get? Depends what you mean by bad. Your reputation's about to go from quiet fun guy to the man who owned half his ex-wife's company and never said a word. Some people are going to call that cold. Some are going to call it genius. Most are just going to be fascinated, which, in this business, is its own kind of currency. I didn't do it for currency. I know, but that won't stop people from deciding what they think it means. I didn't check my phone again for an hour. I already knew what was happening on the other end of it, and I didn't need to watch. Lena called that afternoon, her voice unsteady in a way I'd never heard from her. You should have seen the board meeting, she said. Howard pulled the article up on the main screen before Vivian even sat down. She read the headline in real time, in front of everyone. What did she say? Nothing, at first. She just kept reading. Then she looked up and said, "This is a joke." And Howard said, "It's not, Vivian. I already had it verified." I closed my eyes. Somewhere underneath everything else, that landed harder than I expected. Marcus didn't waste a second, Lena went on. He stood up and said the board needed to consider whether Vivian's judgment could be trusted going forward, given she'd been married to the majority owner of 3 critical vendors and somehow never knew. He used the word compromised. Twice. That's not about protecting the company. That's a takeover pitch. Everyone in that room knew it too. Howard actually cut him off. Said, "This isn't the moment, Marcus," but the damage was already done. People were looking at Vivian differently by the time the meeting ended. Did she push back on him at all? She tried. Said something like, "My personal life has nothing to do with my ability to run this company." But it landed weak, because everyone had just spent 10 minutes watching her find out her marriage was a lie she'd built herself, live, on a projector screen. Nobody in that room was in the mood to separate the two. "How's she doing?" Lena hesitated. "Honestly, I think she finally understood something. Not about you. About him." She realized in the same afternoon that one man had been hiding a fortune from her out of some twisted version of loyalty, and the other had been circling her position for a year, waiting to use any crack he could find. Two men. Two different kinds of betrayal. She just found out about both on the same day. I sat with that for a moment. It wasn't triumph. It was closer to grief for something that had already ended weeks ago and was only now catching up to the person who'd caused it. "Did she say anything about me directly?" She said, and I'm quoting her exactly. "He let me humiliate him for 3 years and never said a word." What kind of man does that? What did you tell her? I told her maybe the kind of man who actually loved you, and you never gave him a reason to think that would matter. Neither of us said anything for a few seconds. "Ethan," Lena said finally, "Marcus is going to push for a full leadership vote by end of week. He's not bluffing. He's got Howard rattled and at least 3 board members already leaning his way. That's a fight now, not mine. Is it? You're the one holding the leverage over Vantage. Whatever you decide next basically decides which way this goes." I looked out the window again, at the same street, the same people who still had no idea any of this was happening. "Tell her I'll call her," I said. "Not to fix anything, just to talk." "That's a start," Lena said quietly. "It's more than either of you have done in weeks." I hung up and stood there, watching the city keep moving like nothing had shifted, when everything had. 3 years of being dead weight, and now the entire company that called me that was waiting to see what I'd do next. For the first time since that conference room, the silence in the apartment didn't feel like grief. It felt like the space right before a decision, the kind that doesn't ask permission from anyone anymore. I thought about calling Vivian right then. I didn't. Some conversations need more than an hour of adrenaline behind them to survive being had honestly. Tomorrow, I told myself. Tomorrow I'd call her. Vivian showed up at my apartment on a Tuesday, no warning, wearing a blazer that looked like it hadn't been to bed the night before either. "I need to talk to you," she said, standing in my doorway like she wasn't sure she'd be let in. "Come in." She didn't sit. She stood in the middle of my living room, arms crossed, the way she used to stand in boardrooms right before she said something she'd rehearsed. "Marcus is forcing a leadership vote on Friday," she said. "He's got 5 board members leaning his way. If it goes through, he takes operational control and I become a figurehead until he finds a reason to remove me entirely." "I know. You know." Lena's kept me updated. Not because I asked her to spy. Because she's worried about you too. Vivian's jaw tightened. "I'm not here for sympathy, Ethan. I'm here because you're the largest shareholder in 3 companies that vote could destroy overnight if Vantage fails under his leadership. You have leverage I don't. Employees I've worked with for years are going to lose their jobs if he guts this company for a quick valuation bump. So you want me to intervene. I want you to do the right thing. For once, let it not be about us." That landed harder than she probably meant it to. It was never about us, Vivian. Not once, in 3 years, did I make a single decision about that company to hurt you or help you. I stayed out of it because I respected that it was yours. Then respect it now. Help me stop him. Why should I? Genuinely. Give me one reason that isn't because I need you. She flinched, like she hadn't expected me to push back. Because those people didn't sign up to lose their jobs so Marcus could inflate a valuation and cash out. Because whatever I got wrong with you, I never got wrong with them. I built that team. I fought for their raises, their equity, their seats at the table. Marcus sees them as line items. That's the first honest thing you've said to me since the divorce. Is it enough? I looked at her for a long moment. 3 years of being called dead weight, and here she was, in my apartment, asking dead weight to save a company. "I'll do it," I said. But not for you. Her eyebrows rose slightly. Then for who? For the people who actually built something real there. Rachel Kim's team at Meridian. The engineers who trust leadership not to sell them out for a stock bump. Marcus doesn't care about any of that. You might have lost your way sometimes, but you never stopped caring about the work. That's the difference. I didn't attack Marcus quietly. I didn't need to. I released a statement through Sterling Holdings, backed by documentation Daniel had spent 2 days confirming. The shell entity, the timeline of share purchases against confidential fiscal projections Vivian had shared with Marcus before the board saw them. The pattern of manufactured instability designed to force a leadership vote in his favor. This isn't personal, I told Daniel before we sent it. Make sure it reads that way. Facts, timeline, documentation. No opinion, no adjectives. You could add a few adjectives, Daniel said. The man deserves it. Maybe. But facts are harder to argue with than anger. I want the board convinced, not entertained. By Thursday, 2 board members who'd been leaning toward Marcus withdrew their support. By Friday morning, Howard Vance called an emergency session and removed him as COO before the vote even happened. Marcus never called me. I heard through Lena that his last words in that building was something about how he'd underestimated the husband nobody paid attention to. I didn't feel triumph hearing that. I felt something closer to relief that it was over. Vivian came back one more time, a week later. Quieter this time. No blazer, no rehearsed opening line. Thank you, she said, for what you did. You didn't have to. I know. She looked at me like she was waiting for something else. Some door left open a crack. I keep thinking, she said slowly, maybe we could. Don't, I said gently. I didn't do this for you. I did it because I finally remembered I don't have to be small for someone to love me. You didn't teach me that. I had to learn it after you. She nodded once, like she understood, even though I could see it cost her something to hear it plainly. I misjudged 2 men, she said quietly. I just realized it about both of them on the same day. I know, I said. I'm sorry that's how you had to find out. She left without saying anything else, and I let her. 3 months later, I stood in the Meridian offices watching Rachel present the new routing platform to a room that actually listened when she spoke. You should say something, she said, nodding toward the room. You built half of this before I even joined. You built the part that matters. Sophie was in the back row, arms crossed, grinning like she'd been right about everything, which, mostly, she had. Arthur sat beside her, Kane resting against his knee, watching me the way he used to watch blueprints, like something he'd helped build was finally standing on its own. Proud of you, Sophie mouthed from across the room, and for once I let myself believe it without deflecting. Through the glass wall, across the street, I caught Vivian walking past on her way into a meeting at a company that was smaller now, quieter, still rebuilding what Marcus had nearly taken from her. She saw me too. She didn't wave. She just watched for a second, the way you watch something you understand too late to keep. I didn't feel anger looking back at her. I didn't feel love either, not the way I used to. What I felt was closer to peace, the kind that only comes after you stop needing someone else's apology to move forward. She thought divorce would break me. She never saw the comeback coming.